Well, hey, friends, we're about to get this episode started. It's a good one, but I first wanted to let you know about something that I recently created. I know that what you want most from your spiritual life is a sense that God is near and that your experiences have meaning within His plan for your life. But sometimes we run into seasons when they just don't make sense. God doesn't make sense. And you wonder if He's even aware of how the hard circumstances are affecting you or your prayers are just kind of bouncing off the ceiling. What you need in those times, the spiritually rocky stretches, is a plan for engaging God. Well, fortunately for us, the Bible is full of people who experienced the exact same frustration with God and whose faith survived the experience. How? Well, that's why I wrote What to Do When You're Mad at God, which you can get as a free download by going to halfwaytherepodcast.com/mad. Just go there right now. You can put in your email address and then it shows up in your inbox and it's completely free. Plus, I will send you the latest content and our new material that we're working on. I've got a bunch of things I can't wait to share with you. But if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe at any time. So go now to halfwaytherepodcast.com to get your free download and a plan to help you move through your anger and back into worship. And let me know what you think. So again, halfwaytherepodcast.com/mad. And hey, let's get this show started. Well, welcome everybody to Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. I'm your host, Eric Nevins. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited about this conversation. Today, my guest is a gentleman who I've had the privilege to hear him speak. He has led and mentored my children. He's our, I don't know what your official title is, but middle school director. There we go. Middle school director.
That works.
I was going to say junior high because that's what we called it when I was a kid, and I'm just old now. Middle school director. Anyway, please welcome to the show, Billy Berglund. Billy, welcome to Halfway There.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I forgot the official title there, but
it's all good.
Anyway, I'm glad that you are here, and I'm excited to get to know you a little bit because you're at an exciting time of life right now, and I know that there's some uncertainty with that, of course, as there always is, but I'm interested to see what God's doing in your life and your heart as you're going through it. So, Billy, I gave just kind of that general introduction, but tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm Billy. I grew up in Nebraska, and my wife, Hannah, and we moved out here about 3 years ago, by August of 2015, to start over at Denver Seminary. And when I did that, I got plugged in at South Fellowship Church, where I'm at now, and working with the youth. And it's just been an awesome experience for me, getting to learn and grow through a variety of opportunities, and primarily working with youth, which is something that I'm really passionate about. My wife and I grew up in a youth group in Omaha, and actually in the same youth group, which was kind of fun.
That's cool.
And so then that's been a huge part of our journey. I think being encouraged and loved on by adults just through their youth group and through mentoring and through sports and different opportunities. And so now just getting a chance to kind of give back in that way, it's been exciting. It's been a lot of fun. So nearing the end of seminary now, on pace to graduate in December, and we're just praying about what's next and what God might have for us. So,
yeah. How does that feel?
Yeah.
I mean, I know how it feels because I've been there, but you tell me.
Yeah. It feels a bit, it's a little bit uncertain at times. I think, I think I'm someone who's kind of control. I want to know exactly what's going to happen and what it's going to look like. I think God's kind of got me in this season to really, we'll work on trusting Him. I think through different parts of my story, he's been working on that theme, I think He's definitely in that now. I'm so focused sometimes on, what am I doing? Where am I going? And I think He's really pressing on me, like, who are you becoming? And to sit in that a bit. And so I think that's, I don't think I'd prefer to be in that spot, but I think that's definitely where I think God's got me right now, and got us. I think as we're kind of in this time of what's next. So
Right.
yeah.
I had this feeling too that time of life that you're in, the season,
Hmm.
just and your age and everything. That's kind of what happens. You have to kind of figure out who you are and
Yeah,
where you're going. So that totally makes sense. Okay, well,
absolutely.
take us back to Omaha. You
Sure.
said you grew up in the youth group, but tell me about your family.
Yeah. So we were the youngest of two older sisters, and have then 10 cousins. We actually were kind of this awesome family. It was so my grandparents were really involved in the church. It was a really, really big church in Omaha. I think it was about 3,000 people, and there was so then my 10 cousins live in Omaha, and so we all grew up at the church, always going to church, part of youth group. And I was the youngest of 10 of them. So I was always kind of the one that was looking up to them, wishing I was one step further in my journey. They'd go off to college and I'd be jealous, and they'd get married and I'd be jealous. And so kind of the youngest, kind of always,
Mm-hmm.
waiting for that next step. But it was great. I mean, we had some great memories. Growing up, we would vacation in summers to Keystone, Colorado. Actually, every year we'd always go to the same place, and so yeah, it was really just a unique time to have those cousins and be able to grow. My folks worked at the church, actually volunteered, but they worked with the sixth grade ministry, and so there's about 50 to 60 sixth graders every year, and they ran that ministry for 20 some years. And so I was
Cool.
always at church, just growing up, going to church, doing that around the faith. But um, for me, I don't know if it was just a desire to be different or just my own, I don't know, immaturity or whatnot, but I was just loved sports. I just wanted to do sports. And so I think for most of my journey, that's what was kind of my driving identity piece, was sports,
Mm.
wanting to play them, be involved with them.
Well,
And
tell us how that
yeah,
took shape in your life.
yeah. So I was, let's see, about seventh grade. In Nebraska, everything's football. That's the
Oh
big
yeah.
sport, and everything. So it was about seventh grade, and that's when I started playing football. So I did basketball, football, and baseball. Seventh grade went well. Eighth grade went well, and started noticing a pain in my knee. And it was bothersome. I went to the doctor, and it wasn't going to be a major surgery, but they had to take out part of my kneecap,
Ooh,
which was crushing for me. I mean, eighth grade, that's your whole world.
yeah.
So they did that surgery, and that caused me to miss basketball season that year. And then they had to do another surgery to kind of clean it up. And that went pretty well, but that was a total of about 5 months. I was kind of on the shelf. And then that year I was playing baseball, and noticing some pain in my back, and actually then had to go in. And so I had a stress fracture in my lower back. And so it was that was going to be 7 months with no physical activity, no lifting, no running, anything. So in all, it was about a year where I couldn't do any sports. And, looking back, it's probably not that big a deal. But for me at that time, it was huge. I mean, I think um, just devastating. I mean, those are my friends, those are my environment. And so when I got healed, the doctor said, your growth plate's kind of affected, and you'll never play football or baseball again. That's you'll never have that opportunity
Oh, wow.
because of those injuries. He said that you could play basketball, and so going into high school and college, basketball was kind of, I think God was trying to teach me through that, that your identity is not in sports. But what that ended up happening, I think, is that I just poured all my energy into basketball. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what was a driving force for my identity, I think. Fortunately, I was still in the youth group. I mean, I knew the right things about faith, and my relationship with Jesus Christ, and knew that he died for my sins, and I knew the hope of the gospel. But yeah, I think my priority, if I had a chart or whatever, would have been sports for sure, and then specifically would have been basketball after that. So
Yeah. So you grew up in the church.
mhm.
How did your faith start to become your own?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is actually kind of a driving force for me now was in the youth group. I had a leader, a couple really good leaders. And I think what stands out to me about them, I honestly can't tell you a single thing that they taught me, like a teaching lesson or anything. What
Isn't
I
that
keep in
interesting?
mind,
Is
yeah,
like that's okay. Can I just make this point? We spend a
yeah,
ton of time creating content for
yes,
people, and there's that Maya Angelou quote that people don't remember what you said; they remember how you made them feel,
yeah,
right? And that sounds like it's true in your life.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's lesson after lesson or whatever, and even now as a middle school director, I remember that they're probably not remembering all of the details of what we're teaching. They're going to pick up things here and there, but it's the relationships. And for me, that was the case. I mean, having in middle school, I had a couple of really good friends, and one specific leader who just hung out with us regularly, cared for us, walked with us. And I just remember that really standing out as important. Actually, he actually performed my wedding, which was kind of fun. Years later, and then into high school, playing basketball. It was a specific time. It was my junior year, and we had a volunteer assistant coach who, during one of the games, I got poked in the eye or something and had to go over to the hospital. But I just remember him sitting with me in that moment and just walking with me, talking with me, and then after this whole injury thing, he asked if he could just keep meeting with me, just talk about life. And I really point to that as really, really important to me. It was through an avenue of sports, but it was
Mm.
a way that he just loved on me. He'd take me out to lunch, and we'd talk about all sorts of things, as especially important for high school guys, how to treat women, how to, what does it mean to actually like engage scripture? What does it mean to do this Christian life thing? And he was fairly open about his own struggles and his things that he's grown through, and was really big for me. His name was Scott, just in walking with me through that. And so I've remembered that, I think, a lot. And I think I actually have the opportunity now to be a high school basketball coach as well. And I think that's one of those things that's really important to me is those relationships and being able to develop that over time.
Yeah, that
So,
is so huge to have
yeah.
someone who comes along and just takes an interest in you. And there's a season there, especially in high school, when your parents want to do it, but they're not necessarily
Hmm.
the person that you're ready to listen to.
Yeah,
It's good to have somebody
absolutely.
else who's willing to step into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you're playing basketball,
Hmm.
and that became kind of a big part of your life, I believe.
Yeah. So then I had an opportunity to play in college. I went to Wheaton College in Illinois, which talk about those 10 cousins that I think 8 or 9 of them had gone to Wheaton. My parents had gone to Wheaton. They met their spouses there. My sisters went to Wheaton. They met their spouses there. So there was a little bit of pressure to go there. My dad played basketball at Wheaton. And it's an awesome place. And so I think I was growing up and I just said, I'm never going to go to Wheaton. Everybody else did it. I just want to be the rebel and not. But actually, I took a visit there my junior year of high school and just really liked it. They had an awesome science program, which is what I was pursuing, and had an opportunity to play basketball, sent some film in, and so yeah, I went off to Wheaton. Right before I went off to Wheaton to play my senior year of high school, I started to like this girl. Her name was Hannah. In the youth group. And so we actually dated the 5 months before I left for Wheaton. And then, I was trying to be cool or whatever. And I said, as I go off to college, I don't want to date anyone back in Nebraska. And so we broke up right before I went off to college. And yeah, so that was kind of leading up to that. Um, and then getting to Wheaton was a really interesting experience for me. I think it was very formational. But not in the way I would have expected. Great people, great friendships. Getting to play on the basketball team was a great opportunity. There were some challenges, I think, with certain things with the coach and certain things with just the setup was a challenge for me. I struggled a bit. I struggled with specifically with some of the classes. I was in a science major. Just was really challenging for me, kind of a new level of difficulty. And so I think in this time was really when I started to talk about like my functional image of God.
Mm,
Was just that he was disappointed in me. I think that's really something that shaped my journey. I knew the right things, right? I mean, I had mentioned, I believed in Jesus Christ, and I was praying to God. I understood what that meant, but there was so often I just felt like God was disappointed in me. I don't know if that was from my high school basketball coach or college, or I just felt like I never quite measured up.
yeah. That's
And so
interesting.
seeing,
Do you,
yeah.
well, do you think that comes from like I don't know, it sounds like you had a great church, but did your church teach things like that?
I don't remember that specifically. I think some of the pressure came from myself. I think, a high achiever. My sisters were phenomenal
Gotcha.
students, but they were always great. I mean, it wasn't that my parents were very encouraging and supportive. I just think I put a lot of pressure on myself, being a high achiever, wanting type A kind of. I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, like that control piece. I just wanted to be, I don't know, in control, and so I put that immense pressure on myself, and that's something I still wrestle with. I
Yeah.
think I've grown in that, but
So were you
yeah,
projecting your feelings about yourself onto God?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I think I just feeling like whether it was performance was a big thing. So if it was a test at school, or if it was playing on the basketball court, if I didn't measure up to that level of what I expected, that I feel like I should have been at, then I just felt like I was a failure.
Yeah.
And it's really that identity piece. I think that's why I'm so passionate about it now as I speak with youth or as a coach. But I think identity was like my performance. And so it was great on good days, right? If, you play well or you ace the test or whatever. So your identity is awesome. And then on days when it's struggling and when it's difficult, yeah, you just feel like you failed, and there's kind of this roller coaster of emotions. And yeah, I think that really defined a lot of my time early at Wheaton, was just looking for acceptance, looking for, I don't know, just that feeling of perfection or achievement. That was often elusive, I think, at that time. So yeah, that was a challenge. I think I really struggled. I went through some challenges.
Like what?
Uh, yeah, so I was in a relationship right away when I got to Wheaton, and that was a real struggle for me. I think just always trying to be somebody that I wasn't. Awesome person, it just wasn't a good fit for me. And I felt like that was part of my identity, was just I had to be in this relationship. I had to be part of this. I think when studies went south, I began to think like I'm not going to make it into. I was going to be a physical therapist. I was like set on that, and I'm stubborn. And so 2 years
Yeah.
into the program, and I'm really struggling. So I thought, well, that's not going to work out. And I thought this basketball thing was going to be awesome, and I was riding the bench most of the time. And so I think things that I had projected in my mind, whether that's achievement in a relationship or in school or in sports, were kind of one by one, like going by the wayside. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I know the truth, but I wasn't living in that.
Yeah,
So
you weren't experiencing it. So you were feeling
experiencing it,
like,
right?
God
Yep.
makes these promises, and then here you are, the things that you put your identity in, whether it was relationships
Yep.
or
Absolutely.
your ability to play sports, God was kind of stripping away.
Yep. Absolutely. Kind of one by one. And so in that time, actually, one of the summers in undergrad, I actually got the chance to work at Kanaka camps. There's a series of camps in Missouri, around Branson and Lampe, Missouri, and they're kind of sport based. They're not always sport based. There's like 7 different camps, and these were phenomenal. And so I went as a what do you call it, counselor, and it was a great experience. That was really one of the big moments, I think, for me in my college journey. It was, I was there, and I was going to be like a basketball instructor and then a camp counselor, and but being there was just amazing. There was a guy named Nasa. He's a Christian rapper, and he's like this big guy. He played college basketball. Um, Early in my time there, I sprained my ankle really bad, just doing something. So I was in a boot and on crutches, and at this camp, it was really challenging to do anything when you're on crutches and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I considered going home like 2 weeks into it, just to go home and be able to rehab it well for college basketball and whatnot. But at that time, I don't know, God brought him into my life, and he helped me memorize scripture, which seemed like a small thing, but he just give me this list of scripture or list of verses, passages, and just walked me through that. And I remember two specific, but John 3:30 was kind of the main one. He must become greater and I must become less. And I think as he kept saying that to me, and as we kept talking about that, he said to filter my thoughts and my questions by that verse. Like, he's like, you could go home and you could get your foot rehabbed and you could be all good and set for your own thing. But like, what's better for the kingdom? What's better for, your impact on these kids? And I was so self-focused. I think, I was terrified of my own basketball career and missing out on like investing fully in these 10, 15-year-old kids in my cabin. And so I just think that God really used that verse and that relationship with NASA to encourage me to stay. They said I'd be on a boot for 3 months, and I was out of the boot in 3 weeks.
Wow.
And it was a great. I was just being there, being with those students, and I think just at that time it slowed me down a bit to really learn to like sit with people, sit with the students, and just be fully present there. They had a thing where there's no technology. You couldn't have a phone or anything. None of the campers, none of the leaders, for 6 days of the week. So there's nothing. So you're just really in nature. You're kind of out there. And I think learning to be present with God, learning to be present in his word, and learning to just be with people, kind of that idea that Scott had modeled for me earlier in high school. Just that was so important to me. So that really stands out. I think
Yeah.
that at that time in my life,
Yeah.
really began to help shift that.
I
So.
was curious about what that did for you in terms of, um, your enjoyment of, kind of helping other kids. Like, sounds like
Mhm.
you developed that there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think as weird as it sounds, I think I just began to take, in some ways, like the arrows off of myself and put them on others. And I think that that's what I needed to have that mindset shift. I don't know. I mean, I was only playing Division III basketball. I wasn't going to go in the NBA or anything, but I was very self-focused, my own performance, my own whatever. And I think that I don't know, through that injury, through that relationship, just kept causing me to see the world through another's eyes. And I think it really helped me open me when you're in those cabins and you're in those small groups with those boys. I mean, they share deep things, and they're talking about their lives, and just being able to be with them and to remember. I think I just started to remember, people who had done that for me and for what they had come alongside of me and just loved me in those seasons, and pointed me back to truth, and loved me, walked with me. And so, yeah, I think that's really what that did for me. I don't know if I'd put that together before, but I think
Mm.
that's really what that was. Just being present with people and just loving them and encouraging them. I mean, one of the campers' fathers was a coach at Oklahoma State, and his dad had died about a month before the kid came to camp.
Oh, wow.
And just deep, heavy stuff. And just to walk with someone, right? Not to always have the right perfect answer, not to, but just to sit with them and to love them, and to, I think it was just a powerful time for me. I think with that too, it's probably a little later in my story, but I think just, in ways I connect with God now, I think one of those, specifically moving out to Colorado, is just in nature, just getting unplugged, getting,
Mhm.
even going for a walk, going for a hike, just being in nature, I think is huge for me, because with the noise of always on the computer or the cell phone and just the noise of life, I think that camp really taught me how to just get away and the importance of that. I'm even reminded now of the need to do that more. I think just to be in nature, and Laura Flanders over at the seminary has really helped me with that.
Oh yeah.
Mentoring process. Like, how do you connect with God? What are ways, and how do you create space and margin in your life to get alone with God and get into Him? And I think so. I'm passionate about that. I think with getting better at turning off technology and just being. So I think that camp really helped me with that as well.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, I just want to mention for our friends listening that if you, well, Laura, because Laura Flanders was really influential in my life as well. She was my leader
mhm.
in when I was in school, and so I actually interviewed her for episode number 17, which is like 2 years ago almost.
Wow.
So you guys can go back in the archives and find that. And she actually recommended a book called With by Sky Jitani that was huge. But anyway, you guys can check that out.
It's a great book.
It is oh man, amazing book, and I think everybody needs to read it. But anyway, that's check that out if you guys want to know more about Laura. So anyway, you mentioned her. I wanted to say that.
Yeah.
But so interesting, man. I think that's very cool that you discovered as you were growing up, and this is really normal. As you're growing up, you kind of are focused on who do I want to be, who's God making me to be, and you discovered a little bit of who you are in helping the students there at the camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Absolutely.
Well, what happened next?
Yeah. So, well, a lot, but I think one of the things that's been a theme throughout my life, and I think this is purely the work of God. I mean, I don't think there are just random coincidences. I think this is God ordained. He brought Scott into my life in high school as a college freshman. Towards the end of my freshman year, I had a guy named John. He was one of the senior captains who was engaged. He was going to be moving off campus. He was about to graduate, and he asked if he could just meet with me one-on-one. That senior year, that spring of his senior year, my freshman year, and just getting to sit with him, and he just asked about my life, very similar to Scott in high school, and just was huge. And I think when he left, then there was a couple guys, and one named Ben and one named John, who worked at a local church in Wheaton, the Wheaton area, who similar type thing. They actually were a college pastor and a high school pastor of the church I went to. And so just get to walk with them, to just talk with them. They had played basketball at Wheaton, and they were now in ministry. And so as I got a little bit older in the journey, my sophomore year was the hardest. I think I struggled a bit with depression. I got to have some counseling, which I highly recommend. I was so fearful of doing counseling. And it was humbling, but I think it really was important for me just to verbalize how I was doing and help have someone who's trained in that area to walk through that with me was huge. And had begun to still was in science classes. I had gotten out of the relationship that I was in at Wheaton, and that was a really good thing for me. I think good for both of us. She was a great girl, and I. We just were different, and it was healthy for us to transition out of that. And so that was healthy, going through counseling. Really started to develop some good guy friends at Wheaton. And so that began to happen. And junior year, then we were living in a stairwell with 16 guys. These are my close friends. And it was really, life was really had turned a lot. It was great. But I was still in science classes, and I'd signed up to be in the human anatomy class, I guess the human cadaver lab, which formaldehyde, and you go down there.
That does not sound fun to me. I'm not a medical guy. Ugh.
It was terrifying. So this was kind of the thing. It's like, if you do this, you're going to be a science major, you're going to do physical therapy. And so I went to that class, and I just couldn't stand it. I saw people around me just loving it, and it was not for me. And so I was wrestling a lot because I was meeting with that John and Ben at that church, and I kind of always wanted to be in ministry. I felt like I don't know. I think God had put that in me in high school. I always remember in high school, kind of wanting to be in ministry, but I just felt like I was never going to public speak. I just said, God, I'll do I literally
Oh,
told
wow.
God, I said, God, I'll do anything in the world, but I'm not going to be a public speaker.
Really?
Um, yeah, this is what I told him as a high schooler, and then into college, I reiterated that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, friends, so listening to this, I'm surprised by that because Billy is actually a really gifted speaker, and
Thank
some of
you.
his I'll try to link some of his sermons here that he's preached at our church. But uh, that's amazing. It's funny how God uses those kinds of things, right? Interesting.
Yeah, it was crazy. So that was my junior year, and I could still told God that. So there's a class at Wheaton called Public Speaking 101, which is in every sense Public Speaking 101. It's like a 2 credit, like you take it as a freshman, and I had put it off till my junior year because I said, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna be a speaker. I was passionate about that. I was gonna do physical therapy because I loved like one-on-one helping people, and I had a lot of physical therapy, but I just didn't like the speaking part. But anyway, so I was in this public speaking 101 class as a junior with mostly freshmen, and I was in there, and there was a lady who was an adjunct professor who barely spoke any English. Kind of interesting
Please
to
don't
be your
tell me
public speaking.
she's doing the public teaching class.
She was a public
What?
speaking teacher, so she had a really thick accent. I mean, she spoke English, but it was difficult. And so, I was in this class, and I don't know, I just had some fun with it. Because I am the junior with freshmen and whatnot, and so I was going, and I gave a speech, I think, on like eating healthy vegetables or something, and she just loved it. I don't know, like bless her heart, she just was. So she came up to me after the end of that class. It was just a quarter long class, and she said, Billy, I don't know anything. I can't do her accent, but she said, Billy, I don't know anything about you, but she said, I think you need to be doing some sort of speaking in ministry. And I thought that was a very unusual comment
Wow.
to get from someone like that. And at the time, I was in this, formaldehyde, doing the human cadaver, and smelled bad all the time.
Yeah.
And I was just doing terrible. And I had this mentor over at the church, Ben and John. They were working with me, and so at that time, I called my parents, and we were praying about it. And I actually, at that time, so at the end of my first semester of junior year, I decided to switch majors. The worst time to switch majors. But I said, I'm just going to pursue this, going into ministry. I don't know what that looked like. So I just decided to switch into Bible and theology as a major, and knew that was going to set me back a bit, and didn't know what that looked like. And I didn't know what job that would be, but I just said, I felt like God was just really pressing that into me, to say, give this a shot. You never know. And so I did. And so Ben was a high school pastor at that local church. He gave me an opportunity to volunteer with his high school students in his youth group. And so, and part of their church's real mentality is like discipleship, mentoring. And so he let me disciple a couple guys real intently. He gave me an opportunity to speak, which was huge. I mean, I think it was just a real turning point for me. I loved it. My advisor and professor at Wheaton, her name was Lynn Kohick, who ironically just accepted the provost and dean job here at Denver Seminary.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I got to meet her a couple of weeks ago, actually, as she was back on campus. First time in 5 years I got to see her, but
Cool.
kind of crazy how God does that. But so, yeah, that's kind of how I began to shift into ministry, I think. And at the same time, I was beginning to talk with Hannah, who we had dated in high school. And so we had begun to talk again, kind of long distance. And so through that journey, kind of towards the end of my junior year, she flew out to Chicago, and we began talking again a little more seriously. And that summer we began dating again. That was after my junior year. So yeah, and kind of a crazy twist. Then she went to Crown College in Minnesota, and she was a year younger than me.
Okay.
And Crown had a connection through my home church in Omaha for a scholarship through the church, like to the school. And they have a really good pastoral leadership program. They have a great Bible and theology program, which Wheaton does as well. But with the switch and my credits and everything, I was going to have to take an extra year to do 5 years of undergrad. And so it was a really difficult decision because I was, still playing ball at Wheaton, and I'd really developed these deeper friendships over time at Wheaton. And then felt like God was leading Hannah and I on, and me into ministry. And so I decided to difficultly, but I think it was the right decision. I know it was the right decision to transfer to Crown then after my junior year at Wheaton. So that would have been the 2013
Gotcha.
to transfer on to Crown. So yeah. So
so then you finish up there.
Yeah. So I did 2 years there. And so after our first year, after my first year there, I finished basketball, was really enjoying my classes and studies. And then we got married that summer, and then we did one more year at Crown. So that was so I did 3 years at Wheaton and 2 years at Crown, and finished up.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to have to hear we broke up and then later started dating story from Hannah's perspective, because
yes, you will.
I'm curious about that, but we'll find out. We'll do that.
That was a journey. That was, her dad was good too. He has this tradition where you meet with him for like an hour one day. You go out to this field and he asks all these questions.
Were there guns involved?
He did, as a joke. Okay. He kind of did a shotgun kind of as a joke, but so anyways, but I think in that, I don't know if this story is probably one of the biggest in my own life and Hannah's life, I think, as well, is in that time. So this was right after we had gotten married. We got married in August of 2014, and we went on this honeymoon. We had an opportunity to go to Cancun, Mexico.
Cool.
And yeah, it was great. And so we get down there, and on day 4, I got horribly sick. And this is a long story, but the short story is I got horribly sick, had to go to the hospital, couldn't move in Cancun. So we had just gotten married, and we had one kind of credit card that we were using for purchases and everything. And Hannah got kind of flustered, and she lost that card. And so we were in Mexico without any money, and we had 2 cards. One of them wasn't activated. So we got taken to the hospital in Mexico, and they began to treat me because I was pretty sick. And then they had to withdraw the treatment because my body wasn't, or though they didn't have the funds to pay for it at that time. And so it was like 2 a.m. So my folks in Omaha there was nothing we could do to like transfer or get anything done. And so they withdrew treatment. I went back to the hospital. Crazy. I had to come back, give them my passport, come back the next day, get all this treatment. It was pretty traumatizing. We were, Dave just married. And so for the next 3 days, I basically just sat on the bed and ate saltine crackers and was really sick. So it was an experience for sure. But coming back from it, we thought the sickness had kind of left my body. We weren't really sure. So it was really unusual. It did in a way, and in some ways something was wrong. And so the majority of that first year of marriage, I was sick. I didn't know how. Some of my blood levels were off. Some of my health levels were extremely low, kind of dangerously low. And so I would go every few weeks to a doctor or something, and they give me different things, and it had some difficult side effects. I think certainly for us as a couple, and it just felt like it was a real challenge. And I feel like that first year of marriage was really, I guess the language of the critical journey, that wall experience where I was just angry at God. I just was mad. I thought, we're going to get married, everything's going to be perfect and everything. And it was just really hard. And I was just bitter, I think. We were in Minnesota, and so it was below zero like most days. And
wow, that's one of your problems. You were in Minnesota.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes, we were in this little on-campus place, and I was finishing school, but it was not the same friendships and stuff when you're married in your 5th year and your friends have kind of graduated. and my basketball eligibility was up, so I didn't have that outlet. And I don't know, I just struggled, and I was mad at God, and it was really hard on Hannah and I. I think we just journeyed through that together, but we were really hurting. And so, some good things happened. In May, we graduated. May of 2015, we both graduated undergrad and had a big celebration. And then 2 days later, I got checked into Mayo Clinic, which is up in Rochester, Minnesota. So Hannah and I went, and my dad went with us, and it was just a humbling time. I mean, they did brain scans, they do all sorts of stuff to try to figure out what's wrong with your body. And so this was one of the most I think vivid memories I have of my life. I think formationally, so we had scheduled this appointment for spring break, and we couldn't keep it. We decided we would push it off to April. And then in April came, we thought, we'll just get through graduation. So the third time I had made the appointment to Mayo Clinic. So I finally got in there. And so it was Hannah and I and this doctor, who was the third different doctor we were supposed to see. Again, I don't think God does coincidence. I think this was for a reason. So we walk in, and he says, hey, tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us what's going on. And we began to share, our journey and just going into ministry, going to be, preparing to hopefully be a pastor. I don't know what that looks like. And then we shared about some of our challenges this first year of marriage and my health struggles, and just felt so discouraged. It was something where I outwardly seemed okay, but in the inside was just something was wrong. And I knew it. And doctors would just kind of say, oh, you're young, you'll be fine. No, there was no clear answer. So I at the end of that conversation, I just looked at the doctor and I said, I just feel like we've had the hardest start to a marriage, that there could be. And I remember he looked right back at me. It turns out he was a committed Christian working at Mayo Clinic. And he looked at me and he said, I completely disagree. And he said, you guys have the hope of Jesus in you, and you guys are committing your lives to proclaim his name, to love people, to invest in people, to share Jesus with other people. And he said, what could be better than that? What could be a better foundation of a marriage? What could be a better, way to live? And I think that just, it struck me again, similar to Kanaka in a way that, like, my arrows had been so focused on myself, my own illness, my own frustrations, and some rightly so. In some ways, it was really frustrating. It was a challenge for Hannah and I, but in a lot of ways, I think my arrows had become so focused on myself, I had forgotten that peace and the hope that we have in Jesus. And he goes, do you trust that God can heal you? And I said, yeah, maybe, I don't know. And he really challenged me to trust God in a new way, and to say, you might not get an answer to this, you might not get healed, but do you trust God in the midst of this? And do you say you trust God? You're going to, studying Bible and theology, you're going to be a minister. Like, do you say you trust God, but do you actually trust God? What does it look like in your life? And
wow.
I just think that we actually ended up not really finding anything specifically. By God's grace, a lot of that has been healed. I recently just had a checkup, and things are fairly normal again, which is phenomenal. It's just so weird, but I think that God brought us through all of that to see that doctor at that place at that time, and to have him speak into my life, going into ministry, and just to realize that, do I actually trust God? What does that look like? And do I realize that for each of us, whatever that is in our life, we have the opportunity to carry the hope of Jesus, whether you're sick, whether you're this perfectly healthy person, or whether you're in ministry or you're a business person, whatever it is, that you have Jesus inside of you, and you can reflect that to the world that's watching, more than what you say, how you're living and what you're reflecting. I think that was just a really powerful time for me.
Oh yeah, what a powerful question. And it's interesting that doctor, maybe may or may not have done anything to heal your physical body, but he healed your perspective.
He did. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Right? Like he just changed the way you were thinking about it. And dude, that's awesome. What a powerful moment. I love that. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you guys eventually ended up coming out here to Denver.
Yeah. So later that year. So that was May. And then we came out here in August.
Okay.
And started which was crazy because we had felt like God was calling us to seminary, but we had no job, we had no money, we knew no one out here. Um, we had a little bit of money, but we weren't sure on how we would pay for rent and all that.
Hmm.
And 2 weeks before coming out here, we sensed Denver Seminary was where God was leading, but He provided a scholarship and He provided a job for Hannah, and we found a place to live, an apartment complex, and so He opened up some doors. And then I had sent an email to Pastor Ryan at South in May or something when I was looking at seminaries, and he had lost the email, which was kind of funny. And he found it like in August 1st or something and said, "Hey, if you're still interested, we were hiring a youth resident at South." And so we moved on August 7th of 2015, we moved to Colorado, which was a Saturday. Sunday, we got up and went to church at South with my family and Hannah, and then family took off back to Omaha. They had helped us move in. And so then on that Monday, I met with Ryan, and on Wednesday, I started at South, which was
Wow.
crazy. I'd sent in resume and background stuff before, but it was quick, and it was getting plugged in. But it was such a huge blessing to be part of a local church and being able to get serving right away coming out here. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, I absolutely appreciate not only your story. You've been so generous and open, and you have some great stories. I appreciate that, Billy.
yeah,
I've enjoyed your ministry. Both, certainly we mentioned already, but when you've had the chance to speak, you're articulate
thank you.
and have some good insights. And so I love that. Don't stop doing that. But also just
Thank you.
giving, just investing in my kids, and I know Elijah's appreciated you a lot. And so I think the future is bright. What do you think is next for you? I know that it's unclear, but where do you
Sure.
think God's leading right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think along with that answer might be a longer answer, but I think so. Ryan preached on Pastor Ryan at South Fellowship. He preached on the prodigal son, that story that was in the fall, and I had shared as part of my journey. I just felt like God was always disappointed in me. That just was a prevailing mindset I had. I knew God loved me. I knew this and that. But anyways, I just felt like that story, for some reason, in that time, in this past fall, spoke to me so specifically about that God delights in me, and that He runs to me. That image was just so clear in Luke 15 of the story of the prodigal son, and he runs to him and embraces him, and
Mhm.
it just really helped shape my functional view of God, which is so important. I think Tozer said, "What comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you." I think
Yes.
that's so true in how I think and process. I'm recovering perfectionist, I think, and I think I'm on that journey. But that really spoke to my heart, and I think has really changed the way I think I operate. Not perfectly. I think I have a long way to go in that. I still wrestle with uncertainty and doubt, but I think knowing that God delights in me, that He's got a plan and He's got a purpose, and He embraces me. I just think that image has been huge for me to understand that I'm living from God's approval. I'm not having to live for His approval, which goes back to that book that you mentioned, that
Oh yeah.
we often live for God, or we try to live under God or over Him, and instead of living with Him and just doing life together. And so, as I think about next steps, I don't know. I think I have a passion to preach God's word. I have a passion to be very relational. I love coaching. I love youth ministry. I love being with students and helping them on their journey, just loving them, pointing them to truth. And as people have done for me, just mentoring. I think the mentoring process is huge. Ryan has been my mentor here at South these last 3 years. I had a mentor at Crown who was huge, and then those ones in college and high school. So I think mentoring is huge. I would love to be able to invest intentionally in other men, and have them invest in me, vice versa. So, I think next steps would be definitely, I love youth. So hopefully youth ministry. And I would love to be able to be a pastor someday, perhaps. And if we're open to God's leading, if that's, Omaha is where family is, but Denver is where we are now and where our heart is now. And so we're definitely open to what God might have. And just as I this is helpful for me even to go through this story,
Yeah.
to remember how God has been faithful. I think that's one of the biggest things is my short-term memory. I just think God's not, what's he doing? He's forgot about me. He's not. And then I have to remember how he's been faithful and how he's provided an opportunity to come out here to at different stages of my life. And so
Oh yeah.
I think trusting that. Yeah.
I think you can see God's hand in all over your life. And it's pretty amazing. So Billy, if people
Thank
want to
you.
get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. Yeah. They can, well, my email is Billy, with a Y. Billy at southfellowship.org is my email. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. You can contact me that way. Also, love to hear about people's stories. Love to walk with them. Love to journey with them. So,
Very good. Well,
yeah.
Billy, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your story. God's doing big things, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the time.